You never would have believed this happened if these moments hadn't been captured by eyewitness cameras. What do you think of this selection? A deadly mountain bike race in France, a daring prison escape in Canada, a glacier that collapsed right in front of a kayaker in Alaska, and a common construction crane that fell on a sacred temple in Thailand. Meanwhile, a passenger from an airplane window captured the launch of a rocket. Yes, all this happened in the world not so long ago, and now we will be witnesses number 2, right after the original eyewitness. You are on the Top Facts channel, and we haven't wasted time to collect these amazing videos for you. We wish you an interesting viewing, and of course, let's go. About 62 miles south of the city of Anchorage in Alaska lies the Spencer Glacier, a massive accumulation of ice that extends into a forest and ends at Spencer Lake. Here, you can enjoy kayaking and camping in a recreational area. It's a unique place in Alaska. In August 2019, Andrew Hooper and a friend embarked on a kayaking adventure on the Kenai Peninsula. They wanted to see the glacier close up, although their wives warned them about the risk. Approaching in kayaks, the friends heard a strange crack and realized it was coming from a large ice arc. Inevitably, the ice began to crumble, first in small parts, and then a huge layer in the middle fell into the water, causing explosions of ice splashes. After a refreshing bath, tsunami waves began to overturn their kayaks, which at that moment was quite dangerous. After publication, this video became famous. In an interview with journalists, Andrew said that they had witnessed a magnificent spectacle and miraculously survived. Probably his wife said something completely different when he returned home frozen and in wet gear. Welcome to Hell Mountain. In one of the largest mountain resorts in France, the small town of Les Deux Alpes, there are crazy annual mountain bike races with a participation of more than 1,000 riders. These madmen make an ascent with their equipment to a snow-capped peak of over 9,842 feet high, and from there starts a race of about 15.5 miles to the finish. Once again, riders gathered on the track on July 2, 2019. No one is allowed to touch the bike until they start the signal sounds, the song Highway to Hell by AC/DC. The loudspeakers explode and the riders rush down the mountain. But about 40 seconds after the start of the race, the real hell begins on its own. They descend vertically from the hill at a speed of about 62 miles per hour and approach the first turn at a narrow point, which forces everyone to slow down a bit. Of course, this leads to a bottleneck chain reaction. Cutting each other off, riders fall and overturn. And until the other 800 riders figure out in time, the chaos won't end. The first lucky ones got ahead, and the rest were stuck in a pileup. What's the point of coming down the mountain to end up in this bike mess? The eyewitnesses who made the video didn't quite understand whether to cry or laugh. But as bad as it looked, no one was seriously injured that day. And according to Sports Illustrated magazine, the culprit of the accident was just one cyclist, the one who slipped first and drew the whole group to him. Kinda looks like a brood of spiderlings scattering from the nest. Most of the riders got back on their bikes and continued the race. And if you're interested, the winner was a guy named Kenyan Brown, reaching the finish line just 32 minutes after the start. An hour's flight from Bangkok is a city with a complicated name, Nakhon Si Thammarat, one of the oldest cities in Thailand, known for its beautiful Buddhist temple. But, as usual, temples are not repaired by gods, but by people. So, in August 2020, this ancient building needed reconstruction, the demolition of an old crematorium. The monks hired a contractor and had already paid the company about $80,000 to build a new structure. But first, they had to dismantle a 50-foot smokestack. And it was at this stage that everything went wrong. The crane operator missed and latched onto the chimney as if it were love at first sight. It broke at the base and fell like a dry tree in the completely opposite direction to the desired one. As it fell, Its weight dragged the crane along with it. Everyone was united among a common goal, but the sacred temple suffered the most. Fortunately, no one was injured during the accident, but the spirits of the deceased might not have liked it. Locals swore they heard the screams of thousands of souls in the area. Chongqing is a city in China that, according to the 2021 statistics, occupies the 51st place in the world in science and technology development. It is full of educated people, and they should have known how to safely demolish an old 5-story building. In December 2014, workers used a giant jackhammer attached to an excavator to weaken the structure, but they could not predict how and when the building would fall. Most of the first floor was emptied, and then the driver hit a support. Someone was filming from a safe distance, waiting for the building to fall at any second. The driver seems satisfied and begins to back up moments before the building collapses, right where the excavator was. Initially, it seems that everything was going according to plan, but the building suddenly leans to the left, and we just hope that he manages to back up in time. The scene disappears behind a massive cloud of dust, and it was later known that no one was injured during the collapse. Jaws Beach in Hawaii, which translates as Jaws, is one of the most famous for its massive waves. It quickly became popular among surfers, especially thrill seekers. In 2008, Mike Parsons, a professional surfer, decided to conquer the largest wave he could find, and he found it. A wave 62 feet high, rising like a wall of a house. Perhaps he just wanted to get into the Guinness World Records. Otherwise, what could make a person go there? In these heart-wrenching shots, the risk increases and the wave nearly catches up with Mike. World records of some desperate surfers are broken by others over time, and they all perform epic stunts. In January 2013, American surfer Garrett McNamara surpasses himself and almost everyone on the planet when he rode a 98-foot wave off the coast of Nazaré in Portugal. This video is awe-inspiring. With all due respect to surfing as a sport, many doubted his sanity. Others were simply inspired by his bravery. The athlete himself said he had been preparing for this moment all his life and knew it would be the biggest triumph or failure of his life. Debates about the exact height of the wave he conquered are still ongoing. People just can't believe the figure of 98 feet, and the Guinness World Records has not yet approved this world record. But is it really about the numbers? Formula One is not just car racing. An air show is an incredibly exciting spectacle that requires high skill from the crews. We are witnessing the opening ceremony of the Ace Races in Abu Dhabi. This magnificent air show is the introduction of the modern Olympic Games in Greece, arguably one of the best sports performance. Sometimes a plane can even show fireworks, or many fireworks, a whole show of fireworks right from the sky. And this is no longer the distribution of New Year's gifts, but the dropping of combat munitions. Relax, it's just fog. It appears due to the difference in humidity inside and outside. Although externally, it indeed resembles smoke, and no one would like to see such a thing in the cabin of their flight. When checking the position of the doors is the crew's responsibility. The pilots are not responsible for this. But on this flight, they had to desperately pull the doors towards themselves. Otherwise, they would have been sucked out the cockpit. Fortunately, they managed to latch the door and land without any problems. I'm sure one lesson is enough. Hangzhou is the southernmost city in the navigable Grand Canal, built in ancient times. Like much of China, it is very susceptible to torrential rains and frequent landslides. The rainy season of 2021, which lasted from January to September, the months of torrential rains, ended with a massive landslide that blocked a highway and an entire river. Several video angles show how terrifying these events can be. A massive landslide rolled down the mountain. The earth fell from above with everything on it. Massive trees were uprooted. A cloud of dust covered everything around, and no one knew where it would end. The sound was similar to a roar of a huge waterfall right in your ear. The aftermath footage shows us a barren and muddy mountain slope in the river valley, which, until recently, was green with lush vegetation. According to local reports, only 2 people were injured during the landslide. One man broke his leg and was taken to the hospital, and another person was stuck under the debris, but rescuers managed to pull him out in time. Another case in the same area, the city of Nanyang, is located in central China. This area is also very prone to landslides, and we can see one of them occurring. On February 13, 2022, the police blocked the road due to a warning of an imminent landslide. Or maybe this happens here regularly. These motorists were lucky that someone noticed a small hail of stones rolling down the mountain. Here, a motorcyclist turns his vehicle, realizing that the only way is back, and the landslide begins. When the dust cloud settles, the sight is surreal, as if they forgot to excavate a tunnel when building the road. The stone chippings continue to fall. Did you see how long that this lasted? And how long it must take to clean up the debris? According to local media, no one was injured in the landslide. In March 2013, 2 prisoners attempted an escape worthy of a James Bond movie. It was perhaps the most daring prison break ever caught on camera. Both were serving time in the St. Jerome prison in Quebec, Canada, one for murder and the other for arson. But if their accomplices hadn't hijacked a helicopter and forced the pilot to land on the prison roof, such a plan would never have been possible. The convicts were lowered a rope from the roof and they tried to climb up it. This was captured by security cameras throughout the prison yard. They almost made it, but one of them suddenly slipped down. The escapees failed to pull themselves up, and while their accomplice continued to wave a gun, the helicopter tried to take off, lifting both men on the rope, according to Plan B. The helicopter whisked them away like 007 agents, escaping behind enemy lines. But as bad as their early attempts were, they deserve credit for holding on to the rope. The police found and arrested them a few hours later, but those who don't risk don't even have a chance to dream about champagne. To work as a captain of a large vessel, one needs nerves of steel and the courage of a lion. This is because in the event of a disaster, they are most likely to be blamed. A cargo ship overloaded with goods is not so easy to stabilize and maneuver, especially because someone orders too much merchandise from online stores. Sea carriers face tough challenges. In this video, a fully loaded cargo ship is sailing through the Bay of Biscay. This is yet another notoriously stormy region between Spain and France. A challenging journey for the captain. Just imagine, if any cargo falls, he will take all the blame, even with the ship fully loaded and overloaded. In fact, it's a titanic effort and a huge responsibility. In 2019, a chemical tanker was transporting cargo in South Korea when a series of killer waves hit it. Whether the captain was unprepared for the situation or the ship's mechanics were not quite agile, the tanker came very close to capsizing. Looking at the angle of inclination, about 40 degrees, one more hit would have been enough to turn the ship over. In the end, it reached the dock, but definitely, it would have to be parked there for repairs. Every developed country has a navy to guard its borders and counteract crime and piracy. So, the mission of patrol ships is to detect danger first. In 2016, a Royal New Zealand Navy ship was patrolling a section in the Southern Sea, the coldest and the windiest in the world. They discovered poaching nets with fish, but they literally had to brave the waves. A huge wave hit the ship's bow. Only thanks to the reinforced hull, it did not cause major damage. But imagine, there are people who venture into these crazy waters in small boats just to catch a bit of fish. In March 2011, a small town in Japan witnessed the aftermath of an earthquake. Tremors began in the Pacific Ocean, just 45 miles east of Oshika Peninsula, causing it to shift 17 feet southeast and sink 4 feet. The earthquake, estimated at a 9.1 on the Richter scale, lasted about 10 minutes and automatically triggered a tsunami, raising a 32-foot wave. The spectacle is insane. A huge wave washes away boats, fences, sweeps away homes. We see it breach a 16-foot dam wall in the town of Kamaisi. From above, it looks like water is slowly flooding the streets, but the difference between a tsunami and a flood is that the former doesn't gradually raise the water level, but sweeps away everything in its path. It's estimated that 23,000 people suffered from this disaster. The dead, missing, and injured, and the damage was estimated to be up to $300 billion. Crazy expenses, right? In 2010, the cruise liner Kalila II sailed to Argentina through a section of stormy Antarctic waters. With a displacement of more than 2,600 tons, this ship seemed like a light schooner as it crossed the Drake Passage in one of the world's most dangerous water routes. Despite its size, it met resistance from the ocean, almost losing its balance. The ship's captain, with more than 160 nautical voyages under his belt, assessed the situation as standard until things got significantly worse. When a 29-foot wave hit the ship, the deck swung like a pendulum and water penetrated the vessel. Fortunately, another ship was nearby, National Geographic Explorer, which received a distress signal. The wave deprived the liner of control systems and communications, and the accompanying ship helped them with navigation. In the end, the damaged ship reached its destination at reduced power, with no one on board suffering any harm. Tsunami waves originate deep in the ocean, and it's a stunning sight when the edge of the horizon rises almost to the skies, almost then to unleash its terrifying cascade onto the shore. Few get the chance to see this gigantic crest in the ocean. It seems this captain and the crew of the Japanese Coast Guard vessel are those lucky ones. They witnessed the maturing tsunami, but at a stage when it was too late to act. Fortunately, no one was harmed. Such a wave is devastating on the shore, but it's safer for a ship to be at sea. Therefore, when a tsunami approaches, services notify all vessels to head far into the ocean, otherwise they risk being thrown ashore. Tsunami in Japanese translates to harbor wave. At the port of the Portuguese island at São Miguel, which is near the Azores, dock workers watched as a massive bridge crane lifted its smaller brother onto a boat. Let's call it the small crane. The workers heard the steel cables begin to creak. The load began to sway back and forth, which is not good. And finally, the worst of the scenarios became a reality. The cable snapped, and the load, before falling, turned upside down. The dock workers ran for cover, even more frightened by the possibility that the big crane might also fall, while the air filled with a cloud of dust. But that's not all. The cable swung and hit chaotically everywhere. The small barge crane can lift between 50 and 500 tons, and the large one between 1,000 and 1,500 tons. This time, the load was definitely within the allowed limits, so we blame the faulty steel cables for the accident. It is simply a miracle that no one was injured. But when such a heavy load falls, there will be some explaining to do. In October 2019 in Thailand, local residents witnessed a small tornado at a gas station. Usually, such whirlwinds are not strong enough to cause destruction, but this tornado was different. The owner of a store opposite the station saw people running down the street from the rotating tornado just above the gas station and took out his phone to make a video. Did he expect the tornado to move towards him? Someone runs into the store at the last second before the whirlwind passes over them. These phenomena are called dust devils. They are short-lived and either form on the edge of a strong storm or in the dust on heated ground when the surrounding air moves and becomes unstable. Both types are usually harmless, but this gust was strong enough to tear glass windows from their frames and damage several cars. Repairing high-voltage wires at such a height is an extremely challenging task. So if you find your job difficult, keep this in mind. The helicopter must maintain stability to provide a stable position for the electrician. And also, it's important to disconnect correctly. When someone wants to play with Lego on a larger scale, they become a helicopter pilot. The work of installing towers for power lines cannot be done otherwise, and it requires amazing flying skills. Sometimes to collect more water, you can call a helicopter. Let it be a water carrier. When water is scooped up by a helicopter, it can be not just transported, but also dumped at a needed place, whether to extinguish a fire or water a garden. Using a helicopter for firefighting is applied in complex cases, but what to do at the nearest body of water turns out to be someone's swimming pool. And will these flights be enough? This is the perfect teamwork. The first airplane shows exactly where to drop the mixture for extinguishing the fire. To ensure drones land exactly where they should, a trap has been set up for them. Doesn't it remind you of a butterfly net? Aviation does not forgive mistakes, so patience and skill must be the pilot's life motto. Recklessness won't work here. Neither the pilot nor the machine has gone mad. Sometimes it's good to test a helicopter's maneuverability. This helicopter's pilot can perform a virtuoso parking, even amid constant interferences. Instead of a cup of coffee in the morning, this helicopter's pilot charges up by performing a loop-de-loop and landing on a rock. Helicopters transport cargo from ship to ship. It's funny that these nets look like big shopping bags, only they're not carrying oranges inside. Now let's see what the perfect docking looks like from a cargo ship's perspective. With precise movement on the first try, it all works out, as if they do it 10 times a day. The most spectacular cargo delivery in the world happens by air. No wonder it's not cheap. The main thing is skill and safety technique. Just imagine the level of skills required from a pilot to effortlessly hold a helicopter at an extremely low altitude over a raging sea, and to pick up a passenger too. Some animals have gotten used to being delivered to the pen via air taxi. They've got it pretty good. They nibbled on grass and saw the world. What to do if the airplane is not operational? When it comes to such transportation, it might look easy from the outside, though you don't see such a scene every day. But for a moment, a load weighing 61,773 pounds, that's a task only possible for the world's largest helicopter. And now, see how it happens in daylight, in all colors, from the ground and from the air. Here is the true power. If you love not only flights, but also fresh air from an open hatch and funny selfies, see what it looks like in reality. We absolutely do not recommend replicating it. Another scene from a real action movie. The capture agent lands first and starts the mission before the arrival of the main crew. The Borgholm Dolphin is one of the oil platforms in the North Sea. It's essentially an oil rig, but its top part looks like a raft. Although its attachments to the ocean floor are very strong, its upper part is still floating. And it's a continuous test drive during storms. Giant waves try to play with it, testing its strength. In January 2015, the drilling rig got a chance to prove its stability. Huge storm waves hit the deck from all sides, but the platform withstood. However, there were people on it. They would have been swept overboard by the splashes alone, despite it being almost 65 feet above sea level. If you're in love with the ocean and go there as often as possible, watching this video might convince you to stay away from the open ocean, and especially not to go on a cruise in the North Sea on a tourist liner. In 2017, a massive wave about 98 feet high crashed onto a ship during a storm. We see how much depends on the size of the vessel. If it had been smaller, it could have easily been overwhelmed and sunk. When a wave starts raging during a storm, it's tough for everyone, even huge tankers. Such an outburst of oceanic anger occurred in 2021. For 3 days, the tanker withstood the fury of the elements. It seemed like Mother Nature was seriously angry and wanted to show what she was capable of. It's known that the waters of the North Atlantic are no joke. Sailing here ended in a wreck, not only for the infamous Titanic in 1912. Since then, hundreds of ships have sunk here, but this tanker overcame the storm and successfully got out of the hellish rocking. The Canadian National Railway extends about 19,880 miles across Canada to New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. On its way, it passes through the small town of Salisbury, New Brunswick, known perhaps only for a fox farm that existed here in the early 20th century. In February 2015, a severe winter storm covered an entire town with a thick layer of snow. A local enthusiast named Darren Gordon was on vacation at that time and found himself near the railway tracks, where a train similar to the Polar Express was passing. This guy recorded a scene where the train makes its way through the snow curtain, creating a snow tsunami ahead of it. The snow almost blocks the moving train. Nothing can be seen except white whirls, and it seems like a huge unbreakable worm is trying to burrow through the ground under Canada. The train conductor was frantically signaling to warn everyone about the approaching and invisible train in the snow, but our operator did not understand the hint and took the snow wave head on. This video gained millions of views in just a few days after its release. Darren admits he was standing too close, but he couldn't afford to miss such an opportunity. He is a well-known enthusiast and amateur at filming local trains, whose videos normally get around 100 views, but this was a gift. And what did it matter if he took a risk? The video almost went viral. Too bad for the conductor and the engineer. They were worried. In the seas washing China, fierce storms also occur. Mighty waves toss cargo ships like a matchbox. In October 2021, a fateful day came for this bulk carrier. It was hit by a powerful typhoon. According to measurements on the Beaufort scale, it was assigned the last, most devastating status, 12 points. This means a hurricane wind at a speed of up to 63 miles per hour. Listen, the ship is issuing emergency warning signals. It is heavy listing and not visible at all in the waves. Where I definitely wouldn't want to find myself is there. It's one thing to see surfers on a ship competing with waves, but quite another when an entire aircraft carrier gets hit on the nose. Imagine how big and stable it has to be for airplanes and helicopters to safely use its platform. But when the ocean plays the master, it's time to buckle up or even cross yourself for luck. The aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk was headed to the naval base in Japan and moving through the northern part of the Pacific Ocean, got into an area where a typhoon was raging. The wind at a speed of 50 miles per hour created 33 feet high waves. The Kitty Hawk had to get through this. The distance to the waterline is about 197 feet, and the ship coped with this task. And already in 2017, Brazilian professional surfer Rodrigo Coxa officially beat Garrick McNamara's record. He conquered the biggest wave. It must have been a very intense experience. The athlete went to the Portuguese coast to the Nazaré spot, where the waves are like avalanches. Their height reaches more than 78 feet, the size of 5-story buildings. There are probably no more than a handful of people in the world capable of this achievement. There is one strange moment in this video. You might ask, what is flying over the water? It's a pure optical illusion of another body that isn't in the air. The World Surf League awarded Rodrigo in 2018 with the Quicksilver Double Extra Large Cup for the largest wave ever taken by a person. Royal Caribbean International is one of the most famous cruise line operators in the world. Its dominance can even be proven by a single ship, such as the Anthem of the Seas of the Quantum class, a unique vessel with a capacity of over 4,000 people. On its decks, there are entire amusement parks, not to mention theaters and restaurants. It's no wonder that the company invested about $940 million in its construction. However, it faced endurance tests. In 2016, during a voyage from New Jersey to Port Canaveral in Florida, the Wonderliner was overwhelmed by huge waves. They were so large that they seemed to be able to capsize it. In the end, the ship with passengers had to stop in the midst of the raging ocean and watch the fury of nature in all its blind rage. Respect to the captain, but personally, the topic of ocean cruises is closed forever for me after these shots. As we have already said, a beach wedding is a wonderful event. On one condition, everything is calculated with references to the forces of nature, and with the caveat that the ocean never plays by someone else's rules. Waves, like the heart, cannot be commanded, and if they decide to splash out feelings, they will spare no effort. This couple from California got their lesson. They decided to pronounce their vows of love over the waves, but not in them. Suddenly, the bride turned into a mermaid, and the rescue services rushed after her into the water. Swimming in the waves with entangled veil, hands, and feet is not at all safe. Rescuers managed to quickly pull the newlyweds out. They got off with minor scratches and a big scare. If you're not married yet and decide to have a wedding on land after watching this video, then you would be right. Nuclear weapons only seem to be under control. In reality, their power is difficult to imagine. There is always the threat of a nuclear Armageddon, when the entire planet could turn into a cold sphere of ash. Despite this, some countries continue to develop their capabilities in case political confrontation heats up to the limit. During the Cold War, the United States tried to optimize their strengths by developing nuclear potential. The threat of the Third World War seemed so tangible that in 1958, the American government conducted several tests near the Marshall Islands in Micronesia. This test was called Wahoo, a nuclear gravity bomb Mark 7 with an explosive power of 9 kilotons. This was 2/3 the power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Exploded at a depth of 492 feet. The results were staggering. The bomb created an aerosol dome that soared to a height of 820 feet, and its diameter grew to 3,610 feet in height. When it comes to destructive capability, common sense falls silent. This test was conducted more than 60 years ago. Can you imagine how modern bombs have evolved and what they can do to our planet with just one press of a button? A demonstration of power, the engine of a Boeing 777. which is called 3 axes, is so strong that it can tear apart a multi-ton truck as if it were a feather pillow. It's not wise to be near the working giant at a dangerous distance. This trick looks like an episode from a science fiction movie. In reality, it's a test of an F-16 fighter jet's engine. For this pilot, reaching up to 435 miles per hour at an extremely low altitude is no problem, even from water. Like landing, taking off sand is quite a dusty event. The plane is already high in the sky, but the dust will linger for a long time. The toy airplane also has a Lilliputian run-up. It needs only a few yards to become the world record holder for the shortest takeoff, and accordingly, landing. The little one is delighted. And so behaves the speed of sound. It not only makes noise, but also tickles. Lucky day for swimmers. They shared the lane with a taking off seaplane, and they had no idea they were swimming at an airfield. The advantage of a special agent dog is that it jumps more nimbly and runs faster than humans. Watch how the German Shepherd performs a practice parachute jump from a helicopter to catch a suspected criminal. If you haven't seen more regrettable incidents than this, watch how several tens of yards decide fate. There's a machine, there's no machine. Honestly, I feel sorry for the pilot. It was so close, and everything would have been all right. This story is worthy of a scene from a Bond movie. This time, the helicopter delivery was flawless, and the sports car gently landed on the fort's platform. This is what a landing looks like from the cockpit on a smooth runway. And this is what landing looks like when there's no runway or asphalt, just the pilot's skills, good visibility, and an ice track. Many airplanes require a flat surface and a full-fledged runway, but the massive Boeing C-17 doesn't mind a sandbox. A storm played out behind it, but the landing was very confident and smooth. Landing in a dusty or sandy terrain requires special skills when visibility disappears within a few seconds, and everything depends on the pilot's expertise. Most military aircraft don't brake using reverse thrust, but through built-in parachutes. This is because the nozzles of their engines have a complex design. Passenger flights at supersonic speeds are not yet a thing. It looks old-fashioned, but it's modernly efficient. Kericho is an African city located in the highlands to the west of the Kenya Rift, and the strange weather here is considered a natural phenomenon. In this area, heavy rains with hail occur with record frequency, statistically, every third day of the year. But on May 1st, 2020, an even stranger weather phenomenon occurred, which made headlines around the world. After a series of prolonged torrential rains, a sinkhole formed in the ground, washed out by water, and soon a whirlpool began to form in it, sucking in everything around. First, a whirlpool appeared to be a large puddle, and then it began to swallow grass and whole islands of earth like a big mouth. Locals gathered and watched hypnotized as the earth disappeared into nowhere. We can't imagine how deep this whirlpool goes. The East African Rift Valley is an active tectonic zone that is slowly separating from the African plate. When plates shift, they can expose cracks and holes that become visible on open ground. Here, we have a real water vacuum cleaner. Kruger National Parks is the largest reserve in South Africa on the border of the Mozambique. Here, up to 9 different types of safaris are counted. In December 2013, a family of tourists was spending their vacation here, and they got to see what a lioness mother is capable of doing to protect her cub. The safari jeep had just turned the corner when they saw a lioness with her cub by the road. She looked nervous and suddenly rushed forward. Finally, they understood what had enraged her. There was a young male on the road ahead. There were two possibilities. Either he was desperately hungry and ready to pounce on the cub, or he was extremely interested in the lioness herself. Presumably, the cub looked like a tasty snack, but the mother was the first to start the fight to avoid the attack. This was no scene like in The Lion King, but a scolding from the mother and a humiliating flight of the young male. According to publications in the Planet of Lions magazine, cannibalism in these predators is a desperate measure. However, males can kill cubs if they are interested in the lioness. Carnivorous animals cannot feed on an alternative, so in critical circumstances, they behave cruelly to survive. This guy on the road was clearly experiencing a crisis, one of the two. This resort ferry was traveling along a river in Germany in 2021, and at first, everything was relatively comfortable. But suddenly, a wild wave burst into the restaurant salon, destroying everything. The fact was, at that time, a storm with winds up to 88 miles per hour hit the nearby seacoast. Flights and ship journeys everywhere were canceled, but this ferry dared to go out. No one was injured, but the incident was a shock to the passengers. Turbulent waves swept across the coast of Cape Town in 2019. The government of South Africa sent out an official warning to residents of several cities, alerting them to the stormy weather. But strong winds and a cold front brought much more inconvenience. Massive waves mercifully struck the waterfront, and it was truly terrifying, especially for those who were swept away in their own car. For several days, the town people were unable to even move around the city. The cause of the insane waves was attributed to the climate change on Earth, and indeed, it was a distress signal from the environment. It is also in danger. Have you ever seen an explicitly giant wave sweep away a wedding ceremony? And the happiest day in someone's life turns from perfect to unbelievably epic. Beach weddings are very popular. Who doesn't want a paradise picture? But ocean waves couldn't care less about someone else's happiness, which they demonstrated in this video. In 2022, a couple decided to get married in Hawaii and put a lot of effort into making their wedding look its best. But nature decided to intervene. Was this a good sign? The guests hadn't even cleared the feast from the tables when the waves did, along with the decorations and flowers. But no one was harmed, and even the wedding cake survived. What could be cooler than launching a fighter from the deck of an aircraft carrier? The noise of the engine, the wind, and the excitement. We admire the stunning views and technical capabilities. A huge firefighting airplane took off so close to a yacht with tourists that it gave them a light rocking and an unforgettable impression. A fighter jet is fast, and very fast. The grass is just beginning to sway, and the plane has already vanished from sight, or returned with a new somersault. An epic spectacle, when a plane is so huge that it can literally slice through a cloud, clearing a strip of clear sky. What do you say about this flying object? It's not an alien ship, but it's an Arbius A380, which, due to high humidity over the South China Sea, got enveloped in such a large air blanket. It turns out, not all pilots are afraid of thunderclouds. Some are eager to fly under lightning. Thrilling, but a bit scary. How cool firefighting looks from the air. You can watch it like a movie, and it is really the most effective measure to date. A mistake by inches, for example, another 10 feet, and a terrible accident could have occurred here. How can such a huge machine hang in the air? barely touching the water. Probably it's not very pleasant to plunge into the water, but that's the task for today. Sometimes precipitation comes in the form of athletes. How many parachutists could you count? Personally, I'm also taken aback by such a number. These are not flies on a screen before your eyes. Sometimes the sky is as busy as a crossroad in rush hour. What is called a cavalcade in horse combat is called a squadron in aviation. Now we are watching the execution of a group tactical task, and it is extremely beautiful. The strategic bomber B-2 belongs to the stealth invisible aircraft. However, it most often appears accompanied by 4 F-22 Raptor fighters, which do not lag behind the giant by an inch. So, big fish and followers are not only a natural scheme, but also a quite sensible solution for military aviation. Astana is the capital of Kazakhstan and the second coldest capital in the world, in case you didn't know. The average winter temperature in this region can stay up to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's the average. And the white snowstorms take over the land for a long time. Such a strong winter storm in January 2018 paralyzed the entire capital. Only emergency services and ambulances were allowed to work, and they did not have time to get bored. Just the calls from drivers whose cars were stuck on the highway totaled more than 3,000. Footage from one of them shows how strong the storm really was. Our driver could barely see 10 feet ahead. Meanwhile, this is a highway to the airport, not a mountain trail. Several cars were trapped in the snow and looked as though they had been abandoned here during an apocalyptic winter. It seems it couldn't get any worse. The engine of a Mercedes turned into a block of ice, and people sang songs of despair, trying to cheer up their loved ones. Even if you monitor the antifreeze level in the engine at a temperature at minus 40, it can also freeze. We hoped all of them were rescued soon, because in this deadly situation, the count is not by hours, but by minutes. Virtuosos and madmen land planes in fields. But as for landing in a strip of forest instead of a runway, we haven't heard about that one yet. Now we can see how professionals do it. It turns out you can land an airplane not only on a stationary surface, but also on the roof of a moving truck. The main thing is to match and adjust the speeds. In such weather conditions, this was the softest landing possible. Now the Belgian Air Force is demonstrating their skills to us. The main thing here is to not fuss and to detach from each other correctly. Flying in bad weather has its advantages. Thanks to the rain, we get a visual representation of how the engine works in reverse. A story from Croatia. These guys did a great job landing on an aircraft carrier during a storm. How quickly they stopped. Is any task impossible for them? Landing is done manually, though by instruments. We see how the pilot managed to perform a perfectly smooth landing with virtually no visibility. Crosswinds in Argentina can be so strong that they confuse observers during landing. But not the pilots. They have already studied the seasonal characteristics of this strip. Trust me, it's not for beginners. This is what the runway looks like from a cockpit in wintry weather. Quite bright, right? Now, with no visibility, the pilot is greatly assisted by accurate instruments. You can't brake in the sky and wait for the green light. Although, that's exactly what we were observing with you just now. And this, in case you didn't know, is a small settlement in south of Alaska, where only 200 people live. It's also near the big city of Anchorage, but near, according to local standards, means about 2-hour journey on snow-covered roads. Therefore, not everyone always wanted to go to the capital to have fun, and they found other ways. On November 5, 2019, A local teenager and his friends were riding snowmobiles. To give you an idea, in Alaska, those are like bicycles. And suddenly, one of them passed over a loose layer of snow. What happened next made one of the boys run as fast as he could. There he is, watching his friend descend the mountain, but unexpectedly, from the other side of the hill, a snow avalanche began to slide down. We see the same as the camera on his helmet. It's a first-person view, but at first we don't understand why he's driving away. He looks back several times to make sure how close the avalanche is. Only after about 30 seconds does he finally stop, when he sees that his friend has already arrived. Now all he can do is fall into the snow and feel grateful for being alive. We can't imagine the thoughts that were going through the boys' heads, but his actions saved his life. On this airplane, you can bounce and sit on the nose. Any fun is good if it allows the pilot to easily exit the cockpit afterwards. An example that panic is the worst assistant in any emergency. No one would want to hear the sound of the engines dropping revolutions. But these guys keep their cool and manage to land in a field. Luckily, it was there. An engine failure occurred on board this airplane, but the pilots can't be denied resourcefulness and courage. The situation was unusual and required an unconventional solution. During a flight, a small Cessna airplane experienced an engine failure, so the pilots had to make an emergency landing right on a roadway. So when driving, look around and up too. You'll never know when you'll have to share these lanes with planes. Another case where an engine failure doesn't turn tragic. Right under the plane is a clean field with soft grass, and landing a gliding plane on it is not a big problem, just lucky. Mid-air refueling is some of the most challenging tasks in aviation. Imagine trying to insert a hose into a hole on an icy, squally wind. Try it yourself in the garden sometime, and you'll understand why we just witnessed excellent work. The best way to deal with fare dodgers is the law of physics. An air hair was simply blown off the wing. Let them fly on their own. They're not far off. A vivid demonstration of the expression flying like a bird. This story reminds us of the wonderful adventures of Nils with the wild geese, and they seem not to mind a new leader in the flock. In reality, people wanted to know where the birds migrate. A simple race is of no interest to anyone, and even just going fast isn't enough. Something more cunning needs to be devised. For instance, flying while hanging on the side is already way cooler. Guys, this is not funny at all, and not cute in the slightest. It tickles the nerves so much that it's terrifying to watch. Did the pilot just decide to play Tetris between the towers? The British helicopter Lynx is one of the few capable of performing a loop, and it looks fantastic. We are amazed again by the same fighter, the F-22 Raptor. In its show repertoire is a 90-degree tilt just a few seconds after takeoff. Such are the capabilities of the machine combined with the skills and bravery of the pilot. This isn't just a spin, but a beautifully executed cycle of loops. Most stunt pilots can only perform 2 or 3 loops in a row. Maintaining control while performing such a figure is only possible for an ace. When the humidity in the sky is right and the sun's rays fall at the perfect angle, the atmosphere presents us with wonders, like this rainbow tail. In flight school, they have their exercises. Now, we are not seeing a flight simulator or a computer game, but a real aviation license test. Do you believe that you can change the direction of movement by sticking your hand out of the airplane window? It seems like they are trying to play a prank on us. What do you think? Does this trick contradict the laws of physics or follow them? In fact, this effect is an optical illusion. where it's not every movement of the propellers that matches, but the speed of rotation and the camera settings on the frame rate per second. Not every time you can watch such a show from the window of an illuminator, but the pilot clearly tried not only for the passengers of the neighboring airplane. That rare moment when you can wave to the pilot of a neighboring airplane and he will respond. Remember, this is not slow motion. It just seems so in the sky. In reality, the speed is significant and the distance is dangerously close. I do not recommend you take selfies while sticking out of a helicopter, flying at a speed of 174 miles per hour. Well, unless you want to create some funny memes. Hello everyone, I hope you can see us and we don't fall out. This is how the combat brigade on Black Hawks greeted the fans at a stadium in Maryland. 75. Ejection is a real chance for a pilot to save their life, but the procedure itself is not too comfortable. You are literally ejected from the seat like a bullet from a gun. In June 2019, a driver in the Chinese province near the city of Foshanxi discovered that highway incidents happen more often than in movies. On the freeway, his dashcam captured a nightmare. A piece of iron, shaped like a boomerang, targeted his windshield. Everyone was just driving. The weather was good, the radio was playing, and then, out of nowhere, an iron rod came flying through the air and crashed into the glass. Strangely, the driver accepted what happened very calmly and pulled over to the side of the road. In the slow-motion footage, we see how the iron rod falls into the car. It seems to have fallen from a truck ahead. According to statistics from the American Automobile Association, between 2011 and 2014, there were more than 200,000 accidents due to objects detaching from other vehicles. This happens in an instant, and no one can predict the likelihood of this kind of luck. On February 22, 2019, in a small town called Gardner in the state of New York, a family decided to organize a winter party in their backyard. There wasn't much snow, but a thick ice layer covered the pool. Armed with beer and a shovel, the owner stood directly on the pool's ice and desperately chopped the ice. If the Pirates of the Caribbean theme music had started playing at this moment, and the owner had proclaimed, "Jack Sparrow, step aside. There's a new captain in these seas now," we wouldn't have been surprised. After a few good strikes, the ice layer of the pool gave way, and the owner surfed on the ice floe. We're not entirely sure of the purpose of the action, but the owner probably knew what he was doing. Moreover, he saved his beer. However, music was indeed missing. Brighton is a suburb, a 20-minute drive from Boston in the state of Massachusetts. The winter of 2009 was harsh. Right before Christmas, during a storm, about 12 inches of snow fell. This house was located on the shore of a frozen lake, and the owners decided it was the perfect time to cut down an old elm. They thought the tree would fall onto the lake and didn't call a professional lumberjack. Considering how close the tree was to the house, it was difficult to remove it with just a pair of hands. Here's the owner cutting down a little more, and voila, abracadabra. Probably, repairing the roof will cost more than what a team of tree removal specialists would have charged. Normally, the price ranges from $300 for a simple job to $1,000 at the highest level, if the tree is near power lines or other buildings. The moral of the story is, trust professionals, not assumptions. In the south of Scotland, near Glasgow, lies the modest village of Ferry. The renewable energy service, called SSE, decided to install a huge wind turbine here for testing. They wanted to test it for installation at offshore wind farms. The local residents were concerned about why a marine turbine was installed almost in their backyard. Nobody liked it. When the tests were over, the service decided to demolish the turbine. Watch as a flock of birds flies over it just a second before charges under the supports explode. We also see fragments flying everywhere and, well, to our surprise, The colossal structure this time falls where it should. The scene itself resembles a disaster movie, but the locals were happy to get rid of the gigantic fan near their homes. On May 18, 2021, the United States of America sent the Atlas V rocket into space. The launch took place from the Cosmodrome at Cape Canaveral, Florida, approximately 50 miles east of the city of Orlando. To control space launches, the SBIRIS GEO system, an infrared detection system for ballistic missile launches that reads parameters, was first sent into the air. Fans of such spectacles were allocated to places where they could observe and film the event. But there are lucky ones in the world. Someone got to see the presentation for free, and from the front row, from a seat by the window of a passenger plane, not only to see, but also to film and share with us. We appreciate you generous people. The pilot informs passengers about the rocket launch, which occurs on the left side. A passenger named Andy filmed these amazing images on a flight from New York to Cancun. He was sleeping during the flight, but woke up from the pilot's announcement and began filming. The launch was delayed 24 hours due to a problem with the liquid oxygen system, so it was a total coincidence. Now we can see the vertically launching rocket disappear into the abyss of the sky. Andy described this spectacle as absolutely fantastic and one of the most impressive in his life. Clearwater, a populated city for beach holidays on the west coast of the state of Florida in the United States of America, witnessed a remarkable event on June 25, 2022. Local residents on a yacht were enjoying its truly clear waters when suddenly a storm struck. Lightning was striking everywhere. It was total madness. The yachtsmen turned towards the shore, but at that moment, lightning struck the side of the boat, making our operator jump. A woman screams, "Josh!" That's the name of the man who was struck by the lightning. Yes, it went right through him. He lost consciousness for a few minutes, but fortunately, they were able to send an emergency signal, and the Coast Guard arrived for them by helicopter. You are seeing the exact moment when they are being transferred to the helicopter. In a conversation with journalists, Josh emphasizes how important it is to have a working radio beacon with precise geographic location on the yacht in case of an accident. This device automatically sends a signal to the coastal emergency services. If it weren't for this device, the uncontrolled yacht could have been carried hundreds of miles out to sea, and the chances of being noticed there in a storm, well, you understand. All is well that ends well. That's all for today, friends. Those were the most incredible moments captured on camera. If you liked the episode and want to see something similar, or maybe the next part, then like, write comments, subscribe to the Top Facts channel, and watch our previous top episodes, which are already on the screen.